I have a long statement because I've spent, like all of us, a lot of time on this, and it's torn me up. I understand, hear, and honor the passion of those who see this proposal as a dangerous precedent that delays needed infrastructure. I understand, hear, and honor the passion of those who feel left out of our decision as a city to transform the city into one that no longer prioritizes cars and seeks to consciously limit the use of cars on our public ways. We have embarked on a transition to end reliance on cars and shift current infrastructure that encourages us to depend on them. The shift is part of a process of undoing the past 70 years of prioritizing cars. It's a big change and a necessary change. As challenging as the changes have been and will be for some, the CSO does make our city a safer, more environmentally friendly place to live and work. I will say I do not see this proposal as an apocalyptic change. It would add timeline flexibility. It is neither a ban or a stop to installations. It is a deadline adjustment to the first of its kind ordinance, which probably should have included this timeline in the original. It would add flexibility that allows Cambridge Street, Broadway, and Main to be sequenced and completed in consecutive years. The city memo, I appreciate all the time the staff has put into this, lays out a plan with installation on the first section of Cambridge Street done next year by fall of 2025. That will start in this term. What isn't included in the memo is the construction project on Mass Ave this year, which is absorbing significant resources, staff time, and will have a broad effect on construction-related congestion in the city. And that segment in our work on Mass Ave is monumental and will be an important addition to our bike lane network. Also, what isn't in the memo is the fact that the city was supposed to convene a Cambridge Street working group in 2021 that has yet to be convened. The Mass Ave 4 working group shows that properly done, the community can work together on these controversial installations and do them better for the community. We need a working group for Cambridge Street to get it right. And to clarify for all, work, the city staff has assured me, will not stop on bike lane mileage. Work is underway this year. It will continue into next year. This amendment will do nothing to change the required mileage in the CSO. Now, the first separated bike lane in the city was, I believe, along Concord Ave in 1998, between the Alewife Rotary and the Belmont line. I used that bike lane. My kids were in childcare, and we got a Burley trailer, and we made many a trip along that path. And it was not an easy effort to get that bike lane. That was 25 years ago. It was something of a fight. And yet very little happened over the next 15 years for bike lanes in this city, which is why we all passed the CSO. Now the proposal for bike lanes is encoded in local ordinance and in city planning, and the transition to a multimodal city is underway. I have been biking since before those kids were in our Burley. I didn't even own a car for most of my adult life, and I still bike, like tonight when I came to City Hall. I have enjoyed the expansion of bike lanes. I ride the Brattle Street Garden in Mass Ave all the time. My own kids rode their bikes to CRLS regularly 15 years ago. I wish there had been protected bike lanes then, because they would have started biking to school earlier, as we heard from so many parents today. I bike around as my main mode of transit and experience firsthand the benefits of separate bike lanes. I've been doored. I've had many close calls. I've experienced firsthand the problems of not having separated bike lanes. I fully support the vision of the CSO in installing bike lanes across the city. I know the reason for the proposal and for a timeline was frustration that we didn't time and time again get the bike lane expansion that we had hoped for. But because of the success of the CSO timeline, those of us who want a bike lane network across the city have basically won. We must never lose sight of that. We should celebrate it. We've already installed miles of protected bike lanes across the city, and regardless of the vote tonight, that will continue. The only question is whether the network will be completed by 2026 or 2027. We are leaders as a city for bike lanes. No other city in Massachusetts, to my knowledge, has accomplished as much as we have as quickly. Somerville actually has a great vision, far greater than ours, but they don't have the timeline, they don't have the ordinances in place. Boston is working hard, and still we are way ahead. And way ahead of Arlington, which frankly should have separated bike lanes on all of Mass Ave, and Watertown and every other municipality in Massachusetts. We should not lose sight of that success when we deliberate possible adjustments. We owe it to ourselves and our community to come to these discussions with clarity and grace, with balance and respect. When the idea of additional time to change the CSO was discussed over the last couple of years, or scrapping it altogether, which some might want to do, I was clear I would not support taking away the requirement for continuing to advance, and that putting off the full network installation until 2030 I would not support. My understanding from talking with the sponsors of the policy order is that actually the date of 2027 is already something of a compromise. So as I use the bike lanes, I've defended them, I'm glad the city's moving forward, and I also recognize them in public about my concerns about the implementation, including the timetable with little attention to the larger community. Some believe, well, if we're going to do it anyway, then just let's get it done ASAP, rip off that Band-Aid. That would argue for staying with the current timeline. Besides, many advocates point out, this change in sequencing might just be the first attempt at a ban or moratorium. An alternative view is that we are moving forward, and taking 3 years instead of 2 to complete the network will mean less disruption on our roads, and make for better planning, give our staff a chance to spend more time on that, on implementation, and send the message to those in the community upset that we're spending tens of millions of dollars for a relatively small number in percentage terms of people who use the lanes, that we hear their concerns about the pace of change. That would argue for the proposal of sequencing the work on 3 main streets over 3 years instead of 2. When we passed the CSO in the fall of 2020, it was the first ever, and we were and should be proud of that. It has inspired other places to copy us, and yet it was inflexible in ways that led to problems in implementation. Few ordinances that are innovative, groundbreaking laws are perfect, and adjustments should be anticipated. The timeline should have been different from the beginning. The spring timelines, they're problematic because given our summer construction schedule, they weren't really meaningful. It really meant 6 months before. I don't think it was deliberate, but that's what happened. We've learned from implementation. We saw in North Mass Ave that changes were needed. So after the fact, we added back handicap spots. We had flexibility in the bus lanes. We repurposed some spots on side streets as meters for businesses. We adjusted. We continued to push forward with implementation. We learned, and the staff has been great about doing that. We should take the time to do it better for the east side of the city. A phased approach has advantages, not only for small businesses, but for residents across the city who will see that we listen. It would mean more time for all of us, those residents and businesses, to adjust. I want to address concerns that the extension is part of a plan to delay implementation so that a future council can end the CSO. Not for me. Plus, if this proposal passes, construction will still start on all 3 major arteries under consideration, Cambridge Street, Broadway, and Main Street, in 2025, next year. That puts us well on our way to a completed network and with a clear construction schedule for the remaining mileage. In my opinion, not totally clairvoyant, there's no danger of us not completing the network because stopping construction when we're partway done on those streets seems irresponsible. So if this proposal were only about some parking spots for small businesses, the vote would be easier. Those businesses could get support in other ways, and the bike lanes won't save or destroy them on their own. But it is true that even a few % change in business for some could be a death knell. I have heard from many small business associations and several individual BIPOC small business owners, all of whom asked us to support more flexibility. Among cycling advocates, there is a vision of the 15-minute neighborhood. Within 15 minutes, we should be able to get services, groceries, etc. If our small businesses fail, having a 15-minute neighborhood will be impossible. And there is a danger of that. And yet, it's about more than small businesses. It's about what is best for the city as a whole. We should acknowledge and own that we have ruptured trust among many residents due to the speed with which we've installed the bike lanes in place now. The feelings of exasperation among many residents in the middle, many of whom didn't show up tonight probably because they don't think we're listening. They're neither avid bike advocates or passionately against all bike lanes, is of concern to me. I have deliberately reached out to those walking down the street, talking to neighbors who have no clue that we're even voting on this. And as always, promise to use thoughtful analysis and data in each decision. Some residents want no bike lanes, not me. This proposal is about how long it will take to build the network. And on safety, I reviewed the crash data, and I believe it. I want to note and hope that we can all celebrate that the data show no deaths and almost no serious injuries for cyclists for the last 10 years on the streets we'll be installing, which doesn't mean there haven't been crashes, and we heard loud and clear in testimony tonight. And yet we are, and we should celebrate, we're an incredibly safe city, and will be even more so as we build more lanes. I, perhaps unlike others, do not take issue with the crash data or dismiss the testimony we heard tonight. The point, though, is we're already doing well, and I look forward to continued efforts to provide safe transit across the city. And I'm grateful for the hard work of safety advocates across the city that have resulted in this really great safety data we have. It was heartening to hear from so many advocates who make the point that more biking will lead to fewer emissions and help in our climate goals. I invite them all to stay engaged, since we made incredibly difficult decisions last year around emission pollution that will have 10 times the impact of bike use.
Councillor,
I'm wrapping up.
look,
Bike lanes.
Councillor, our meeting expires in 15 minutes.
I'm almost done.
No, let's get done, because you're there.
So I think it's important to make the point that we also have clear data that the usage of the lanes is below where it should be. 3 times as many cars as bicycles commute and show up in recent vehicle counts. So if my vote was based on what was best for me personally and politically, it's crystal clear I would vote no. Many people urging us to reject any change in timeline are people who supported me, and many are personal friends. And I am under no illusion that the people most in favor of a change in timeline did not support me. This vote is hard, but I will not vote on my personal interest. I will vote based on what I believe, having taken time to listen and review information, data, and proposals on what is best for the city as a whole. And I believe allowing the city to take up until November of 2027 is a reasonable compromise. So I will be voting yes.